la 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 la. Yippee! We're losing money. Everything is turning up roses. Everything is so happy. We're having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have when losing all this boring money. You know, you would think that Moraif just saved his clients a whole bunch of money, but instead he has continued to demonstrate by example that trying to time the market, I call it market guessing, is risky and very likely a bad idea, according to experts like Mark Holbert. So where to begin? Moraif did it again. He mistimed the market for the fourth time in a row since 2009, losing out on approximately another 10.9% in market gains, and that's according to my estimates based on some assumptions that I'll get into. The S&P 500 index went down 19.5% from peak to bottom. Moraif protected you from none of that. Instead, you wound up losing about 10.9% based on the S&P Total Return Index. And that's based on, number one, I'm assuming that on January 1st of every year, Moraif subtracts a 0.99% management fee. Number two, I'm assuming that after he sold the stock portion of your portfolio, 3 days later, after the funds cleared, he invested that money in a total bond market index fund. If he sat in cash, then tack on about another 5%, making it about a 15% loss. Also, as far as I know, he only disclosed that he put 25% back into stocks on March 22nd, 2019, and he stated that he would reinvest the rest over the next 4 months. So I'm just assuming that he reinvested the remaining 3 quarters on April 22nd, May 22nd, and June 24th at the average price for those days. Moraif has been very silent about the dates that he got back in after the first time getting back in. Gee, I wonder why. Moraif is also not GIPS compliant, so the only people who really know for sure are his clients. So if you're a client of Moraif's, then message me if you know the exact dates and whether or not he shifted the money into bonds after he sold or not. And so from the point where the S&P bottomed out on December 24th, Moraif sat and fiddled as the S&P went up 20.71% before he finally put in only 25% back in. What kind of stop-loss strategy waits for the market to go up 20%? This is called fiddling while Rome burns. I don't know what methodology he uses, but this market timing attempt of his was just ponderous. So on June 24th, 2019, the Dow Industrial Average was at 26,727. Just imagine if the Dow was at 43,486 instead. All of you people who signed on with Moraif since 2009, that's roughly, according to my estimates and assumptions, about where the value of the equity portion of your portfolio should be. It should be 61.46% higher, but it isn't. All because you thought that having some guy guess when to get out and when to get back in, you thought that was a good idea. Or if you want to look at it another way, it's as if the Dow is only at 16,759 for you Moraif clients instead of 26,727. You've basically suffered a 38.54% crash, including the fees that you've been paying. That's a way of visualizing the decline that you've suffered versus if you had simply stuck to a simple buy-hold strategy on your own. And so just to get back to even, you're going to need a stock market crash of perhaps between 63 and 68%. That's based on Moraif's past performances. And that's what I estimate it would take. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this would seem highly unlikely to happen. Crashes of 50% or more have only happened 3 times since 1928, and we just had crashes of 57% and 49% in the 2000s. So we got those big crashes out of our system, so to speak. So do you really think we're due for another big monster crash? And by the way, Moraif only averted, after I'm assuming a 1% annual management fee, only averted 29% of that 56% crash, according to my calculations. You suffered a 27% crash. He failed to rescue you from 27% of that 56% crash. And I'm amazed that he didn't get back in down here when he had the chance to avert roughly 49% of that 56% S&P 500 index crash before fees. Can I just tell you something? If ever in your lifetime you're able to somehow beat the market by 49%, lock in your savings. Is this thing on? Get your ass back in. Same thing if you're in Vegas. If you ever hit the jackpot playing slots or whatever, quit and never gamble again. That's as good as it's ever going to get. But Moraif, he waited. It's ponderous. But so Moraif's clients who have followed his advice since before the 2008 market crash, according to my estimates, you people too are now in the red. You fell in the red way back after his 2015 to 2016 mishap. And at that point, you were down 2.5%. Since then, you've paid more management fees, and now you've had yet another mishap of about 10.9%. You're like the Vegas gambler who won a $25,000 jackpot on the slot machine, but you kept hanging out in the casino hour after hour. You blew it all, and now at the moment, the casino has gotten the last laugh. You big dummy. But anyway, after this latest mishap, Moraif's clients must be shell-shocked because the way Moraif was talking, if ever there was a time when timing the market was a sure thing, this was it. Moraif was talking about growth slowing in China, oil prices falling, the death cross, the inverted yield curve. Robert Shiller has been saying that the market is way overvalued. By the way, Bob Brinker is just one person who's not a fan of using a 10-year average to gauge the current value of the market. So you might want to take the Shiller PE ratio with a grain of salt. But Moraif was also saying that big swings in the market almost always happen in bear markets. And Ray Dalio was saying that we're very likely heading into a recession. And Ray Dalio has predicted this and Ray Dalio has predicted that. Who is this guy? Nostradamus? Ray says, and so I must react accordingly. And sure enough, fast forward, and Mr. Dalio eventually lowered his recession odds from 70% down to 30%. Yeah. And so once again, as they say, economists have predicted 10 of the last 3 recessions. Economists have a terrible record for predicting recessions. They're always jumping the gun. And so this is a perfect example of how if you think that timing the market is this simple, like, oh, there's all this bad news that I'm reading and I've got advance notice of a stock market crash, doesn't work that way, folks. If it did, we'd all be rich. When people react to old news, and all news, as soon as it's printed, it's old news. When you react to bad news by selling, more often than not, I think you just sell low. Then if you wait until everything feels all warm and fuzzy and safe again, by then stocks have already gone back up. That's how it goes when you're a Fairweather Johnson investor. So over the last 10 years, Moraif has got to be one of, if not the worst market timers out there. And by the way, I can never figure out why investors would choose a financial planner to act in the capacity of a market timer. Isn't that more like a hedge fund guy that you should be searching for if you want to go down that risky road of attempting to time the market? You know, someone who puts 100% of their work time into trying to time the market, not juggling it with financial planning and managing clients and recording a radio infomercial. I would want someone who's dedicated to the craft at hand. And I guess he does have some other people on his team who do the market timing, but who are these guys? Are they just more financial planners? And by the way, speaking of hedge funds, by law, a majority of hedge fund investors must have a net worth of more than $1 million because hedge funds do things to amplify risk. So I don't understand, why is the SEC okay with a financial planner attempting to time the market. Moraif advertises it as a protective strategy, but look what can happen when things go wrong, as is the case with Moraif's clients since 2009. But anyway, back to Moraif's infomercial. He keeps painting these false narratives, such as this excerpt where he's basically misleading listeners, as far as I'm concerned, misleading them about his performance record.
It's a trade-off. Would you rather lose the 3% or 57%? I mean, it's just a trade-off. And then the other thing is, suppose, as you said, you messed up, Randy. Let's say we mess up. How many times will we have to mess up if each time we mess up it's a 3% loss compared to one 57%er? It would take about 20 mess-ups, right? So we have a lot of runway before we get to the 20 mess-ups.
Am I missing something here? Is my data completely off? According to my estimates, he saved his clients 29%, then he lost them 9.98%, then he lost 10.78%, then he lost 11%, then he lost them 10.9%. And even if every single time he swept the proceeds from the sale of equities into bonds, into a total bond market index fund, that would have been losses of 10.9%, 11%, 10%, and 7%. So where is this 3% number coming from? Unless he's moving the money into put options or an inverse ETF, there's no way he's only missing out on 3% versus if he had done nothing and never sold the equity portion in the first place. And the funny thing is he can't even get his facts straight. Here on his website, he says, would you rather lose 5% every 2 years or 20% every 5 years?
Small losses. If you take a 5% loss, and with our strategy of buy, hold, and protect, we have what we call false alarms. Okay, so in 2011, we said to sell. It was not a bear market. We had in 2010 the same thing. We had the Greek crisis and all that happened. In 2015, we had the China crisis, and that also precipitated us to say that it was time to sell. In those cases, the market went down and we sold, and we had a small loss, in my opinion, a relatively small loss.
Notice how he doesn't mention the amount of those losses.
Now, I want to ask you, assume, and our strategy over the last 18 years has produced 3 what we call false alarms. But let's say that it happened every 2 years, okay, just to exaggerate the point ridiculously. And let's say that you have a hypothetical 5% loss every 2 years.
So he dodged talking about his actual losses, and now he's talking about hypothetical losses.
Versus staying in the whole time and never getting out and having a 20% loss every 5 years. Which one do you think is worse? Well, if your investments go down by 5%, and that's not, I'm inventing that number. That's a hypothetical.
Yeah, you're making up numbers in order to obscure your actual performance.
So would you rather lose 5% every 2 years or 20% every 5 years?
He's trying to justify his asset management service by inventing hypothetical performance numbers that aren't real.
And in November of 2007, our strategy that we used said to sell. And we told our clients to get out, sell all equities. And those that followed our advice were actually out for almost 18 months. We didn't say to buy until June of 2009. So when the S&P fell that 57% that I was talking about, people that followed our advice didn't participate in that one.
Bull crap. As I said earlier, people who followed Moraif's advice actually participated in about 27% of that 56% crash, if you include his 1% management fee. You lost about 27%, so he's being deceptive.
Now, we also said to sell in 2018. Okay, so that happened also at the end of last year. We saw danger signals all over the place, and we said to protect our clients, it's time to get out. Now, as it turned out, it was not a bear market. And you know what? There is no perfect strategy, but when there is danger, we believe it is job number 1 to protect yourself from big losses. Okay,
so you see how he omitted mentioning that in addition to mistiming the market in 2018, he also got it wrong in 2010, 2011, and 2015. No mention of this on this particular infomercial. By the way, is this what fiduciary duty gets you? An advisor who lies by omission? Oh, I know this is just an infomercial. He has a disclaimer at the end of the show. He doesn't have fiduciary duty to listeners on the radio. But wait, He says on his radio show that these are the very same ideas we go over with our beloved and most valued clients. So I ask the question, does he lie by omission to his clients too?
The Dow Jones went down almost 90% in 1929. And if you were a buy holder, you held through that whole thing. You saw 90%, if you had your money invested in that, you lost 90% of your money. You're sitting there, you had $1 million, you now got 100,000.
This is the other thing he does. He presents the straw man argument of looking at 100% stocks, no bonds, no diversification into bonds. And he tries to use that as rationale, as necessity to time the market.
It took 25 years to get back to even. Now, like I said, our average client is 60.
Translation, he's presenting a straw man argument.
Why would you not want to have a strategy to protect yourself from the downsides?
You do. It's called diversification into bonds.
That is so important in my view, that you have a strategy to protect against big losses.
You see how everything is predicated with, I believe, in my view, it's our philosophy. That's a cop-out. That's what people do when they can't prove something with actual data. And they use anecdotes, lots of anecdotes. Anecdotes are great when used in conjunction with facts and data to summarize everything in a nutshell. But when all you can do is present anecdotes and statements of opinion all day, that's a cop-out. Now, another thing I've heard him say a couple times maybe on his show, he'll say that, we went and back-tested our strategy going back to the 1920s, and don't worry, it works. But I've never heard him provide any details. And I've never seen any of this research on his website. So my question is, how many times has his sell signal been triggered? How many times has his sell strategy been put to the test? Back-tested. And if we look at his actual sell signals that he's used since 2007, that's been about every 2.4 years. So that would mean that his sell strategy has only been put to the test perhaps about 41 times maybe. I hate to say it, but that's way too small of a sampling size to come to any conclusions. I don't think you need a degree in statistics to figure this out. For example, I could flip a coin 40 times and it might land on tails 32 times or 80% of the time. But obviously that doesn't mean that moving forward, the odds of it landing on tails are going to be greater than 50-50. And I don't even think that timing the market would give you greater than 50% odds of beating the market, because the stock market generally goes up over time, not sideways. That's why I question any stop-loss strategy. And it's why I trust the research done by Mark Holbert that 80% of market timers fail over any reasonable time period. And for any advisor to advocate market timing without fully educating people about the risks with an abundance of care, without giving them all the facts and data they need to know, it's just completely unethical.